What is up, lads? Welcome to another episode of Brandenburg Bootcamp. We're picking up right where we left off here, and as you can see, we've got that beautiful border as Brandenburg. I managed to actually subjugate the Livonian Order, and we've got that amazing diplomacy there with Poland, Austria, and Burgundy, creating a sort of horseshoe, where in the midst of which is Germany itself. But today we're going to be talking about economics, in particular trading. So if we jump ahead until the year 1630 here in the current state of my game. This is as far as I've actually played at the time of this recording. Remember in the first episode that we actually started outside of the game, deciding what we wanted to do. And one thing that I had decided is that by the year 1600, I wanted to spawn global trade inside of, here we are, the English Channel under my control. And I managed to do that successfully. So I kind of put it to myself that by the year 1600, I would be the most influential nation within the English Channel. Worked out really well. But what I want to talk about is most nations like England, for example, who begins in the inside of an end node, their trade is pretty self-explanatory, where you basically build as much trade power as you can inside the English Channel, which actually increases your influence in other areas, and you just transfer the trade to that area. This is also the same case where I am currently in this game, as you can see. However, not all nations actually have that luxury and privilege of having an end node and being quite straightforward. So for example, let's take a look at Brandenburg from his position near the beginning of the game. Alrighty folks, here we are in a freshly started new Brandenburg game here, so we're going to talk really quickly about the basics just to address that. Basically, I've let a few months go past here, guys, because in the beginning of the game you have like 15 trade power, but it rapidly decreases as people start protecting trade and that kind of thing. So with that being said, we have 9% control currently in Saxony, and Saxony is where our main trade port is, which begins in your capital city, your main trading city. You can actually change this at will, however it costs you 200 Diplo points, and the main incentive to change it is to change it like most people would to Lubeck, for example, as most of the areas that we're going to annex actually pull or trade towards Lubeck. Now with that being said, because we have 9%, we actually have increased percentage in the other areas which pull to that trading area. That's how it works. So you get a trickle down effect where areas that actually trade towards the area that you have influence, you will have increased influence. And you guys can see currently that we're pulling about 0.3 or around 0.3 from each region, Vienna and Krakow, to Saxony. However, we only gain 9% of that 0.3, so it is a minuscule amount, as the rest is bleeding off because we're not an end trade node in the same fashion. So for example, Frankfurt here has pretty good influence in the Rhine and is pulling a fair amount, but mostly because of his influence in the Rhine, and there's so many nations around here. So let's look at our trade really quickly. Conveniently right on 0.9. Let's go ahead and transfer, or collect rather, instead of transfer in these areas and see what happens. And basically we're going to be collecting. I just want to address that naturally I did move my trade port to the English Channel to actually pull wealth into here in my current game in order to spawn the Institute of Global Trade. And all the global trade requires is it to be the largest and most wealthy trade node in the world. I had to pull the wealth into here to actually have it beat other areas like Genoa because I was sapping so much. And then the next requirement is simply to be the most influential in the area, and you can guarantee to actually spawn global trade, so that's nice. But mind you, I was actually making more money using this tactic. So that's good news for us Germans here, guys, who don't have the privilege of having an end node, is that utilizing this tactic, you can actually make far more trade income, and it can feel pretty cool. But with that being said, now that I have moved my trading port, which costs 200 Diplo, and therefore we got 100 of each monarch point for spawning the Institute, so it's a good trade-off. The other trade-off is, of course, going towards the end of the game, the sheer amount of wealth that comes in from the New World to the English Channel is going to make it more optimal to use the strategy, or just as optimal, the traditional method of trading. However, This is how you become a shrewd German trader, lads. So we're going to allow, it was 0.9 if we let a month go by. Now, don't get excited, it's not that simple here. You can see we are now collecting, but it is even less, far less. You lose 50% of your trade power when you collect instead of transfer. So we're now lost 0.11 ducats a month. However, if we were to use the traditional method of transferring into Saxony, because that's our main trade port or trade city, we have some problems that we're going to encounter. Number one, we're obviously going to expand into Lubeck. The areas in which we expanded, of course, were taking one of these provinces, vassalizing Pomerania after the humiliate rival shenanigans and so on, and then expanding into the Teutonic Order. Well, as you can see, we are going to get a fair amount of influence in Lubeck, and even more so in the Baltic Sea. However, we're not going to be able to make use of that in this current state. Now, let's say that we do pull everything into Lubeck, which would be the traditional method that most people would play Brandenburg. They would make their main trade port one of these areas and actually use the wealth that they do have in Saxony and the wealth that they will gain in the Baltic Sea to pull into here. Well, of course, it doesn't feel that satisfying to lose a lot of that wealth to the English Channel when you become quite envious. That inevitably will increase your trade income, but not as much as the strategy that I'm about to reveal to you guys. What we're going to do is, instead of collecting here and here, we're going to collect here and here. Now, naturally, I suggest that you do leave your merchants for the first couple years or so before you make a move, but once you, before the year 1450, actually go in here and annex this, now we're going to have good influence in these areas. And that obviously is a way, without moving our main trading city, to have some kind of benefit because our influence is going to go up here. However, this simple thing that I just showed you is the new trading meta. If people are not aware of it, I hope they do become aware of it. This is how you become a shrewd trader, with the words transfer trade power. If you recall in the first session, I said that the ideal peace offer for many of these nations is going to be taking their war reps, their money, but also transfer trade power. Now, we're going to do another video based around aggressive expansion. But if we look at our ideas, guys, we're going to want Deus Vult ideas, which is, of course, religious. And we're also going to be taking diplomatic ideas. I'm going to do a video based around ideas as well. But with that being said, we need the admin points to complete religious ideas. And if we keep expanding, like I showed you in some of my sort of introductions and teasers, we're not going to have the admin points required to actually get Admin Tech 10, which is both required to form Prussia and to take a military idea group. So up until the point at which we get Admin Tech 10, we're not going to be going crazy because it's just inefficient to do so. We want those first three ideas. That third idea will be a military idea, and at that point, our admin can go deep into coring up some of these provinces. So up until Admin Tech 10, my point is that we're managing our aggressive expansion in a regular manner, because otherwise it's going to be a very ugly, inefficient game. You will just become bastardized if you fall too far behind in tech. So rather than annexing everybody to the left, right, and center, we're going to be transferring trade power. But many of you might not understand, guys, that when you collect trade, your trade power is reduced by 50%, as I already demonstrated, and therefore you make less money. But other nations' trade power is not. So not only, for example, Magdeburg, say that Brunswick is our rival who's allied to Magdeburg, and we go in against Brunswick for the show strength, but we transfer trade power from Magdeburg. Magdeburg is currently the second most influential. Nope, I lied. He's not even the first most or second most. I'm incorrect here. The point is, however much he controls, it will be near us, I imagine, guys, with that market town. We will actually gain the full amount of his trade power. bumping us up to about 16% in Saxony. But moreover, the same thing is applicable in another area. So Pomerania has 8% inside of Lubeck. Well, guess what, guys? When you subjugate Pomerania as your subject, you can transfer trade power in the subjects menu, and you are going to gain the full 8% of his trade power. What is 8% of 14, guys? For us, it's not taken for granted. You will get the full percent. Not only that, if you have a subject like this that protects trade with their light ships, then you're getting the full amount that is protected of trade. In my current game, we have the Livonian Order as a small subject up here. How much influence do you think he has in the Baltic? Well, let's look. He currently has 10%. Let's say he has half of that. He's at 5%. Well, guess what, guys? Are we going to take that for granted? No. That's a lot of trade income for us that we can get the entirety of by transferring trade. If we get involved with this trade league, we can transfer the trade from Riga, which is how much? 7%. So that will bump this up to 13% control. Wherever you're piecing out, you're transferring trade. Your subjects that own the regions are transferring trade. Of course, you're going to have some influence yourself, you're collecting. And look at the coverage that you have here, guys, with your main trade town and your 2 collecting. Do you guys understand that in my game, I was roped into wars against Denmark? And it is only a 30% peace offer to transfer trade power, one of which, unlike fully annexing a nation, they do not have an extreme amount of zealousness in regards to not offering it up to you. They will give you the transfer trade power of 18% or more as time goes on of this region. Unlike other things like war reparations or money, this is one of the only manners in which you can dramatically stimulate your economy without causing inflation. Again, this is the new meta. I mark my words. If you play in, for example, Constantinople as everybody's favorite nation, Byzantium, and you expand, in the past, you have always experienced having your money drift out towards Ragusa, and even creating a subject out in this area would be counterintuitive, because the more powerful your subject becomes, they would also leech money from you, but those times have passed. You can create a subject inside of the Venetian area to dominate this area, who also, between the two of you, you dominate Ragusa, but you could not have a merchant here, and you can have a merchant here, and you will collect the entirety of these 2 regions, whilst also, because as you have the complete trade power here, they will not pull from Constantinople, which will simulate an end node here. This is the new meta. It is an absolute blessing to play with, and as you get merchants through, for example, colonial activities or global trade itself, you have the ability to actually collect in other areas as well. Alright lads, we're jumping ahead in time here and we're going to address both production and trade, but I just want to say that the sort of innovativeness of this video has been used up on trade. There's not going to be any juiciness like there was there in regards to alternative playstyles. With that being said, this is more simplistic. We're going to do some breakdowns here. So a church ordinarily should cost 100 ducats. Let's say that it costs 0.1, pretty realistic, right? Well, if it increases your income by 0.1, then how much is it going to increase it by in 10 months? It's going to be 1 ducat in 10 months. So a 0.1 in a year will be 1.2 ducats, right? For 12 months. So after 10 years, it will give you 120 ducats. Do you understand? 0.1, 120 ducats every 10 years. So it costs 100 ducats. In 10 years, you will have gained 20 ducats, but it will now give you an additional 120 ducats until the end of the game. So you're basically investing money up front to increase this. That's the way you should be looking at it. So with that in mind, that gives you an idea with these provinces here, which is 0.6. It's going to be over 50% of that, guys. So in every 20 years, you're going to be gaining 120 ducats, except more than that. I hope that gives you a reference point in regards to tax. However, keep in mind that as the Prussian idea group, I do have 10% increased tax here. And with that in mind, if you're taking the 0.1s before the 10% or after, that's relevant. And also, if you're forming a nation like Rome and taking their ideas, which is 20% tax, also worth considering. That's it for tax. It's quite straightforward. We're going to move on next towards production. Production is less straightforward, and rather than kind of break it down in a complicated manner, I'm just going to tell you guys what's up. Basically, in Europe, there are niche resources like dyes, and to some extent bronze is relatively niche. Now, these are both good, or copper, is it? It's copper. These are both good. Otherwise, the good resources are basically iron, cloth, and paper. Those are the really good resources. Obviously, gold is good also, but it's very niche as well. Now, there are sort of mid-range resources like salt and glass, but I would say iron, cloth, and paper are relatively abundant, and that's where most of your Diplo points should be going. Speaking of which, admin points are more valuable than Diplo points in my opinion, depending on what your goal and ambition is for the game. If you wish to conquer the world, you're going to have spare Diplo points. Now, we don't have as much of an easy economic breakdown here with the workshops, because the workshops themselves can be broken down in that manner. However, the prices change of goods. And that's why I highly recommend, for example, building them on cloth, knowing that the price is going to go up, and therefore it's going to be an even better investment. Things become complicated when you want to build a manufactory, because ordinarily a province has a base, I believe, of 1 goods produce. You can see 1 goods produce here. So a manufactory gives you 1 goods produce. This means that it's basically increasing the production by 100%, but it compounds with this 50%. Absolutely amazing. So in other words, it's very expensive, but they are amazing. In every province that has a very good resource, like I just said, or alternatively a mid or even low range resource, but the development is extremely high, you're going to want to build that manufactory. See, there's salt here in Onspark, but Onspark has been pretty highly developed in terms of production. So we've got that production going here. The difference between cathedrals, or churches rather, and workshops is basically when you get into this lower tier, you're going to be concerned about building slots, guys. If the development is not that high and therefore the tax is not that high, you're going to be taking development slots with the church. So just keep that in mind. You might be better off using the workshop and the manufactory because you only have so many building slots. Now, also when you're judging which is best to build, consider this. Right now, of course, we can build this on livestock, but it is what it is. It's going to scale much better if we go down here to the iron, and we come over here and we realize that this iron province here is at 75 autonomy, which is the minimum because it's not stated up. So always make sure to be deliberate in where you're investing your money, because you're looking for that return over time. So if we invest it here, we can state this up later, whether we come with the admin points or the states available, because this is a pretty good state, right? And then this is going to give us much more money. So if you guys behave in this manner, you're going to be able to get 155 ducats a month by the year 1630, just like ourselves. As you can see, all 3 of our resources, tax, production, and trade, are very high, and both trade and production are going to leave the tax in the dust as we go into the future. Not that tax is bad, just that production and trade are that much better. One last thing here, guys. Your admin techs do periodically just straight up increase your production. So keep that in mind when judging whether you should invest in a sort of mediocre production province or mediocre tax province, as your production will increase over time. Alright lads, that's it for this episode in regards to economics here in the German region. I hope that this really benefited you guys, and rest assured that regardless of what happens in the future of this series in regards to diplomacy or aggressive expansion, keep in mind that all of these peace offers, we're going for that sweet transfer trade power throughout the course of this series. I hope that it benefited you. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of Brandenburg Bootcamp.